What's up, guys? So, over the last couple of days, I've been experimenting with rudimentary, thrown together T-line devices, transmission line devices. And I am slowly developing an understanding of how and why someone would want to use one. Now, the first part I had to understand was just exactly how you design a T-line. And as I understand it now, it's not really that complicated to build a pretty basic T-line. Now, let me preface this by saying that I'm not an expert in anything, okay? I'm good at a lot of stuff, but I'm not an expert at anything. And what I feel like I'm probably the best at is taking a fairly complicated thing or situation or problem and boiling it down to its bare essentials and developing a general understanding of that concept and then being able to communicate that to someone else. I think that's probably my strongest suit. So, grain of salt, this is my general understanding of the T-line. So first of all, you need to be able to contain inside the T-line a quarter of the wave that you want to produce. Okay? A quarter of the lowest frequency that you want to produce. So if you look at the way a frequency looks on a graph, it starts out on the zero line, and then the amplitude's up, swings down below the line, and back up again. That is one cycle. It looks like a S turns backwards and then turns sideways. A hump up and a hump down back to the line. A quarter of that wave would be the part that goes up to the top. From the zero line up to the top. Okay? That's a quarter of that wave. As long as you contain a quarter of that wave at the speed of sound, which is 1,130 feet per second, inside of the tube, then you can play that note and the higher notes. Can't really play much lower than that. Just a very small amount lower than that. So something like an 8-foot, and I'm just going to ballpark my numbers again in my head. An 8-foot tube will play like, I don't know, 40 hertz or something like that, 40, 45, something. I have to look at the math, but in order to get down into the mid-30s, you need about 9.5 feet. So you need to be out there around 11 or 12 feet long if you're wanting to play down to the low 20s. Now, that length of that tube determines, again, the frequency that you can play. But the other characteristic that's important is the surface of the moving driver. So in the best case scenario, you want the measurement from the top of the roll of your surround to the top of the roll over here to be the same distance as the chamber that you're playing into is. So in the perfect world, you're using a tube, which is why I used a tube for my experiments. And that tube is exactly the same diameter or circumference as the speaker is for when you measure from the top of the roll to the top of the roll. That's the perfect scenario. You're not going to get there, but you're going to get close. And I ain't sure what the difference is. So if you had a tube that fit this driver, for example, and then you used this little driver, I'm not sure what happens if you change and use a much bigger tube than what's required. Or on the same idea, if you took a driver that was, say, this size, and then built a funnel or a horn to horn it down into a tube this size. I know that can work, sort of, but I don't know what the complications or the changes are. Does it make the tube seem shorter, longer? What does it do? What does that cause? I'm going to be experimenting with that in an upcoming video. Just so you know, that's something I'm planning on testing. But I've got a couple of different things I need to get to before I can do it. So I want to test what changes happen whenever you use a larger driver than the tube and a much smaller driver than the tube. And I'm going to find out. So far, I've learned that at the right tuning, you can make some really intense, deep bass with a very small driver. In fact, I've made quite a bit of bass with this little tiny guy right here, this exact one. And what a speaker. This is a little Sundown 2 3/4 inch mid-range tweeter combo. And I had it playing 30 hertz pretty solidly. If you guys haven't seen that, go back to that video and check it out. But there is some pretty cool stuff you can do with it. There are limitations, though, when it comes to a transmission line. From what I've seen, is a space. They use a lot of space. You can get some pretty good output. You can get really clean bass. You do have to deal with overtones, and what an overtone is if you blow a horn, just blow a French horn, tuba, trombone, whatever, that honking sound that the horn makes, well, that happens in a T-line. And it happens at the tuning frequency, which is one of the reasons why it's so freaking loud at that frequency. And there are ways to get around that problem. And so it's kind of got its little bugs and issues. What's interesting, though, is if you use that overtone to a certain amount with like vocal range or an instrument range, it can really be mesmerizing at how good that can color the music. It's distortion by all rights, but it really colors the sound in such a way that sometimes in certain songs with certain stuff, it's amazing. In other songs, it's just horrible. So, it is what it is. But for a T-line or a transmission line enclosure, it's something you have to consider. You're going to have to contend with the overtones and the ringing. You're going to have to contend with the large quantity of tube required in any space that you're going to put it into. If you're looking at a 10-inch speaker, you're looking at a 10-inch diameter tube that's 12 foot long to play the bottom. And then that's a lot of thing in the space. Now you can fold it up, and so you can compress it, but you're still looking at a pretty good sized speaker. And of course it has those weird characteristics. So it's kind of a niche thing. It can do amazing things. I think it may be overlooked in the possibility of being a mid-range enclosure. There's so many possibilities with that. Creating like a surround sound effect, where you would put the primary driver in the back behind you and then have the tube run around and come out to where it was creating the front stage, and the actual driver is creating the rear, because the driver produces much less sound than the port does. So I think using it in some kind of surround venue in a building could be pretty phenomenal. And I understand that Bose did something like this with a couple of different designs. Of course, Bose did. We may hate on Bose in a lot of ways, but they've always been very, very innovative, and they've pushed the envelope and coming up with really cool, innovative ways to recreate sound. So my hat goes off to them. And in fact, I've got a Bose speaker right here that came out of the a Companion 3. And, so this is a woofer out of a little subwoofer out of a computer speaker setup. I forget who made it, but just a generic company. This is just the same basic concept in a Bose Companion 3. You can see the difference in what they were doing here. This is a substantial little subwoofer. It's dual voice coil, which is crazy. I guess they were doing it for control reasons. And the surround is crazy big. The spider is actually quite large in here too. It's got heavy tinsel leads, it's a substantial little dude with a lot of throw, and it's a really nice little woofer. So, and that was never meant to be seen by anybody. That thing was locked away in the vault of a Bose computer subwoofer, which is essentially you got to take a hammer to it to get into it. It's ridiculous. And then you're going to be there for a while. So, again, I digress. Bose also had the acoustic wave radio, the wave radio, which is essentially a T-line. It has a speaker on one end and then a pipe that goes through and comes out over here. And then I think it had a second speaker on this side and a pipe going through and coming out over here. So it had a port on each side belonging to the opposite speaker. And, of course, it made, it was probably tuned to like 90 or 100 hertz with circuits cut off the sound down, around 80 or so. So nothing below that would play, and it would just be, room filling bass off of two very small drivers. And like I said, that's what Bose was known to do, is crazy stuff like that. So I'm all about innovation. But as usual, I digress off down a rabbit hole. So T-lines have their place. I think there are some interesting use cases for them. I know there are people that have used them in cars. Some of my subscribers actually talk about having a T-line in their car, and that's all great. I'm down with it. But I don't think it's going to be what I'm going to do in my subwoofer situation in my rebuild. And if you guys don't know, I'm planning a rebuild over the winter, and I'm either going to go further into the SPL. We'll possibly build a C-pillar wall with some speakers back there, or I'm going to jump away from the SPL and focus more on SQ with still an abundance of volume. Okay. So I'm going to be SQL. I already am, but I'm going to take some of that subwoofer power away and then go to something that's more SQ and probably one or two much larger drivers, and possibly do an infinite baffle. I'm really contemplating an infinite baffle, because when I'm driving my normal self, when I'm riding around, I typically don't even have my rear subs turned on. I turn them all the way down, and I use my front stage sub as my subwoofer in my vehicle. Every once in a while, I get that wild hair, and I'll give it a handful of beans, and that's all great. But most of the time, I'm just chilling. So I won't really miss it in that regard. The only time I'll miss it is when I'm going to show off and cut up, but still, I think having a infinite baffle setup and being able to demo that even at lower reduced volumes will still be unique and interesting. And I think I can make something very cool. One of my ideas is to use an infinite baffle C-pillar wall. Just exactly the way you think, is to do a complete wall with a single big sub in there and have that wall, the whole back of the Tahoe from that point on, being the outside of the listening environment, that being the infinite baffle. So whenever I open up the tailgate, essentially the interior of the vehicle will kind of become the speaker box. And whenever the back is shut or whenever I'm inside the vehicle, even if the back is open, that wall is just going to be an infinite baffle. So there'll be two different experiences to be had. And of course, whether the windows are up or down is going to make a difference in how it all sounds and all that. But I do think it would be interesting. And I also think that that same scenario would be fairly easy if I needed to convert to a large sealed chamber. So I could quite easily, hem it up if it's not working for me. Just basically building a back behind it, a wall behind it, and making that part of the, sealed into a large sealed chamber. But anyway, these are ideas that are going on in my head. So if you guys have any input, I would love to hear about them. And that's where we're going. If you've been wanting to mess around with Infinite Baffle, well, I'm going to be doing some experiments on that as well. I've got to get a few pieces of materials that I need to do the thing and come up with a way to do some tests. But I want to do some Infinite Baffle stuff to find out, what cool things we can do. Now, I'm not building anything really elaborate. I'm going to do some tests that are fairly simple, and I have some ideas. So hopefully that'll play out. We can get that done. And looking forward to seeing if we can. So if you guys enjoy the experimental nature and the learning that I like to do, the information gathering and processing that just makes up like all of my time in my head and my life, actually, then this is where you need to be. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hang out with me, because I get into all kind of crazy stuff. And this coming weekend, we've got another event coming up, and it's supposed to be a pretty good event. Not a huge one, but a pretty good one. I will be down there getting video, so you can expect to see that sometime Saturday evening or Sunday. You'll be able to see what we had going on here in Springfield at the event. And if you guys are interested in meeting up with me, if you're in Springfield, Missouri, or near Springfield, Missouri, just come to the event down there. Like Midwest SPL, I believe, is who we're doing it. Maybe Base Wars. I can't remember. It's one of the two. It's going to be here in Springfield, Missouri at what we call the barn. So just look on Midwest SPL and Base Wars on Facebook and see which one of them it is. Or you can look up 417 Baseheads or Team Savage Sounds on Facebook, and there'll be posts about it there. You can find it that way. But it's coming up Saturday, so like 4 or 5 days, isn't it? 5 days or 6 days or whatever it is. So if you're going to be there, be there. If you're not there, be square. Anyway, guys, that's my update for the moment, and let you know where we're going, where we've been, what we're learned, and what's coming up in the future, and how we're planning on trying to get there. And we'll see how that goes. Anyway, guys, peace.
Yo, I'm riding down the street, got the bass on blast. Car audio enthusiasts from first never last. Subwoofer thumping, got the neighborhood jumping. In the world of sound, I'm always pumping. Car audio enthusiasts, that's my game. Heated frequencies, no two sound the same. From the highs to the lows, mid-range in between. My car sound system is a music machine.